Breaking news: a Filipino diplomat's heartfelt speech at the United Nations has gone viral, celebrated across continents for its raw empathy and sincerity. In a world often dominated by rehearsed statements and diplomatic jargon, this speech stood out for its authenticity and emotional depth. The world paused, not for a polished accent or perfect grammar, but for a voice that spoke directly from the heart. People everywhere, from bustling cities to quiet villages, stopped to listen. News outlets replayed the moment, and social media buzzed with admiration. The diplomat spoke of climate change, not with statistics, but through the story of his grandmother's flooded home, a vivid image of rising waters threatening the lives and memories of ordinary Filipinos. His words painted a picture of real people facing real struggles. He described global cooperation as bayanihan, the Filipino tradition of a community lifting together, moving forward as one. It was a call for unity, for nations to help each other as neighbors do in times of need. His English was clear, warm, and unmistakably Filipino. There was no attempt to hide his accent or change his tone. Instead, he embraced it, letting his true self shine through every word. Instead of formalities, he simply said, "We must, help each other. It's very simple, actually." His words were unpretentious, honest, and relatable, reminding everyone that sometimes the simplest truths are the most powerful. Critics who were quick to judge fell silent. The world listened, captivated by the sincerity and courage in his voice. For a moment, differences faded, and everyone was united by a shared sense of hope. The speech became a symbol, a quiet revolution, showing that genuine connection matters far more than imitation. It inspired countless people to embrace their own voices, no matter how different they might sound. For too long, Filipinos were told their English was wrong, or not good enough. But that day, the world saw its power, the power to move hearts, to bridge cultures, and to make a difference. The diplomat's voice echoed the experiences of Filipino nurses, teachers, and call center agents worldwide, people who use their unique English every day to connect, to care, and to serve. It was the voice of Filipino English, finally, undeniably, taking its rightful place on the world stage. And in that moment, everything changed. A new chapter began, not just for one diplomat, but for an entire nation proud of its voice. Years before that famous speech in the quiet halls of a New Zealand hospital, a different kind of story was unfolding, one that would never make headlines but would change lives in its own gentle way. Maria, a nurse from Iloilo, brought her quiet magic to every shift. She moved through the wards with a calm presence, her hands steady, her eyes always attentive to the needs of her patients. Her English was gentle, her accent distinct, a melody shaped by her homeland. At first, Maria worried that her way of speaking might make her seem less professional, or that patients wouldn't understand her. One patient, Mr. Henderson, was notoriously difficult. He was known for his gruff manner and impatience with new faces, especially those who sounded different. He found her English odd, sometimes even correcting her. But Maria persisted, never letting his frustration shake her kindness. She listened to his stories, asked about his family, and spoke with warmth that softened even his sternest moods. Over time, her patience began to break through his walls. One restless night, when Mr. Henderson couldn't sleep, Maria sat by his bedside. She comforted him, saying, "It's okay, sir. Just breathe. I am here. We will get through this together. Her words, though simple, carried a deep reassurance. She told him a story from her home in Iloilo, painting pictures of warm sunsets and gentle breezes. Her voice, soft and steady, soothed him to sleep, easing his worries for the first time in days. The head nurse, observing this quiet moment, later told Maria, "Your English has a heart. Don't ever lose that." It was a reminder that language is more than words. It's the feeling behind them. Maria realized her way of speaking wasn't a weakness. It was her strength. Her accent was a bridge, not a barrier, connecting her to those who needed her most. Her Filipino English built bridges, healed spirits, and became her superpower. Patients from all backgrounds felt her empathy, and her colleagues admired her resilience. In that hospital, empathy mattered more than accent. What truly healed was the kindness in her voice, the patience in her actions, and the hope she inspired. Maria's story was just one of millions. Across the world, Filipino nurses like her were quietly making a difference, one patient at a time. Filipino English was quietly changing lives, proving that compassion speaks louder than any accent ever could. English in the Philippines began as a colonial legacy, a ticket to opportunity but also a source of shame. Filipinos were taught to erase their accent, to chase a perfect English that wasn't their own. Generations grew up anxious, afraid of mistakes, their creativity dismissed as error. Yet in daily life, a vibrant hybrid emerged. Taglish, Bislish, alive and uniquely Filipino. Abroad, Filipinos like Maria found their English valued for its clarity and empathy. At home, a new generation began to question old standards, seeing their language reflected in pop culture and art. The shame faded, replaced by curiosity, then pride. Filipino English was no longer a flaw. It was an asset. The world was starting to notice. The shift from shame to pride was nurtured in classrooms like Mr. Roberto's in Quezon City, where the air buzzed with possibility and laughter replaced hesitation. Here, students found a safe space to explore language without fear of judgment. He would stand at the door each morning, greeting every student with a warm smile and a cheerful, "Welcome to the English playground. There are no mistakes here, only experiments." His words set the tone for a day of discovery. Instead of drilling grammar rules and memorizing vocabulary lists, he encouraged students to play, writing skits in Taglish, blending English and Filipino in creative ways that reflected their real lives. They created colorful ads using Filipino idioms, turning familiar sayings into catchy slogans and posters that decorated the classroom walls. Students delivered speeches in their own rhythm, finding their unique voices and sharing stories that mattered to them, not just reciting lines from a textbook. For Mr. Roberto, English wasn't a relic to be preserved or feared. It was a box of Lego bricks, ready to be built into something new and personal, piece by piece. Confidence before correctness, he would remind them, believing that courage to speak was more important than perfect grammar. He saw that the real barrier was not vocabulary or accent, but fear. The fear of making mistakes, of being misunderstood, of not belonging. In his classroom, students spoke freely, took risks, and learned that true communication was about connection, not perfection. They laughed, debated, and supported each other, growing more confident with every word. Some teachers doubted his methods, but the results were undeniable. His students were confident, articulate, and engaging, often winning awards for their presentations and inspiring others to speak up. They weren't just reciting, they were communicating, sharing ideas, and building friendships through language. Mr. Roberto taught them to own their language, to be proud of their Filipino English, and to see it as a bridge to the world, not a barrier. His classroom was a joyful laboratory of voices where every accent and every story was celebrated. He wasn't just teaching English, he was teaching pride, resilience, and the courage to speak up. And his students carried that lesson into the world, using their voices with confidence wherever they went, proud of who they were and how they spoke. One of Mr. Roberto's students, Carlo, was brilliant on paper but silent in class, paralyzed by fear of making mistakes. Mr. Roberto saw his potential and started small. One-on-one chats, group work, praise for ideas, not grammar. Carlo slowly found his voice, realizing his classmates valued his thoughts, not his accent. His unique sentence structures offered fresh perspectives. The playground gave him courage to experiment and fail. Years later, that shy boy stood at the UN podium. He wrote from the heart, using the same empathetic English he'd found in Mr. Roberto's class. When he spoke of Bayanihan and his grandmother, he represented every student who'd ever been afraid to speak. He was chosen not despite his background, but because of it. Carlo's journey was proof. Filipino English could move the world. And it all began in a classroom that celebrated difference. Filipino English is now a global force, especially in call centers and education. Accent neutralization was once the goal, but companies noticed something. Customers preferred the natural Filipino cadence. The politeness and warmth, "For a while, ma'am, kindly hold on," became commercial assets. Filipino English wasn't just clear, it was comforting. International schools now recruit Filipino teachers for their nurturing style. Filipino actors and creators gain global fans, celebrated for their authentic voices. The world is learning clarity and connection matter more than accent. English is no longer about rigid standards, but about empathy and adaptability. Filipino English, with its blend of Asian structure, American vocabulary, and Filipino warmth, is a new model for global communication. It's English with a different, more inclusive operating system. And it's here to stay. For generations, proper English was guarded by an ivory tower, rules set by native speakers. This created a hierarchy with everyone else below. But the rise of world Englishes, like Filipino English, is dismantling that tower. Today, most English speakers aren't native, and the language belongs to everyone who uses it. In global meetings, whose accent is correct doesn't matter, only understanding does. Educators like Mr. Roberto now teach for connection, not just correctness. Filipino English's unique grammar and vocabulary are seen as innovations, not mistakes. The new standard is intelligibility and empathy. Filipino English proves the ivory tower was never needed. Language lives in the mouths of its people. What makes Filipino English so effective? Empathy. It reflects a culture that values relationships and smooth social interactions. Features once criticized, sir, ma'am, polite requests, are signs of respect and shared experience. When a call center agent says, "We will fix this for you," it's an empathetic embrace. Filipino English speakers are masters of code switching, adapting to any audience. This is social and emotional intelligence in action. The world is shifting from authority to connection, from precision to authenticity. Filipino English shows that a global language's purpose is understanding, not uniformity. In a digital world, its warmth is a vital force for bringing people together. Filipino English is a story of resilience, a language imposed, then transformed and made their own. What began as a symbol of colonization is now a source of national pride. Today's generation grows up hearing their English everywhere, free from old insecurities. Their way of speaking is not a deviation, but a new standard. Confident speakers are creative communicators, blending languages and expressing complex ideas. Filipino English is dynamic, evolving, and enriching the global conversation. The future isn't about assimilation, but contribution. The world will hear the voices of diplomats, healers, and teachers, speaking with resilience and pride. The most beautiful language is not perfectly polished, but authentically human. The days of laughing at Filipino English are over. The world is listening and learning to speak with the heart.